Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the fridge. On the menu tonight is World of Tanks. Tonight's gameplay comes from a player named Pooolismus, I think. Here he's showing off the virtues of the IS-6 in this encounter battle on El Haluf. So how about we dive into this and have a look at the IS-6. We will begin with the firepower. The IS-6 is armed with the D30 cannon, which is basically a copy of the D25T, which is available on the Tier 6 IS tank. The only difference is that the D30 reloads slightly faster at 11.22 seconds. The D30 has a very low penetration score of 175mm with AP and only 217mm with premium APCR. To put that in perspective, the IS-3, when armed with the BL-9 cannon, has 225mm with AP and 265mm with APCR. Elevation and depression is typical of the Russian tanks, with 20 degrees up and only 6 degrees down. This does limit the places you can go hull down. The alpha damage is quite nice, with 390 per shot, which when combined with a 5.35 round per minute rate of fire gives you just short of 2100 DPM. This puts it above most other tier 8 heavy tanks, which goes some way to making up for the abysmal penetration. The rest of the gun handling stats are very Russian as well. Aim time of 3.26 is long, the dispersion of 0.44 is poor, which means you're going to be sitting still to make any kind of accurate shot. Sitting still brings me to the armour, and this is where the IS-6 shines. While on paper 100mm of frontal hull armour does sound weak, it is very well sloped and very well shaped. This frontal armour can be made to bounce all kinds of things. The turret has 150mm of armour on the front, but the turret is very squat and has a very rounded front, meaning that to actually hit it square on is quite difficult, and the gun shield is quite wide, having a little bit that pokes out the side to help cover the gunner's optic. The shape of the frontal armour is odd. It has these angled side plates that make angling your armour quite difficult. However, in the hands of a good driver, give it some wiggle, that armour works quite well. The side and rear armour are quite strong at 100mm and 60mm respectively, with that rear armour being thick enough and sloped enough to give some of the Tier 6 tanks quite a hard time. The turret sports 150mm on the sides and 100mm on the rear, making it quite durable. 155 hit points combined with the bouncy armour give you a rather impressive package. The turret traverse is a reasonable 25.03 degrees per second, which is only 1 degree per second behind the T32. Mobility on this tank is another thing. I would describe it as average and adequate, although my personal IS-6 has a few perks on the driver, so mine feels decent and useful. 700 horsepower to shove around 52 tonnes gives you a reasonable 13.59 horsepower per tonne, with a top speed of 35 km an hour forwards and 15 in reverse. A hull traverse speed of 27.12 degrees per second puts it just above the American T32 heavy tank, which isn't slow but it isn't fast either, so again, adequate. Touching on concealment, it is good for a heavy, so you can lay an ambush if you need to, but as I've said before, heavy tanks are not for hiding in the bushes, so don't. Get out there and bully someone with your strong stylium armour. Spotting is poor with a relatively low 350 metres, so don't go it alone. You may find yourself out-spotted by a German tank and picked apart without having any idea where he is. Another thing that I should mention is that this tank was first put up for sale years ago, when Wargaming was producing premium tanks that had what we refer to as premium matchmaking. This means that you will not see tier 10 tanks, unless you platoon this vehicle with a vehicle that does. Given the recent changes to the matchmaker, the worst matchmaking you're going to see is 5 tier 9 tanks and 3 SPGs. On the other side of the coin, when you're top tank with only 3 enemy tier 8s to fight, you really get to throw your weight around and bully those little tier 6 tanks. As for me, I enjoy my IS-6. It is one of my most played premium tanks, and before you ask, yes, I still drive it. The IS-6 is a brawler first and foremost. She can't hit a thing at range, but that's not how you're supposed to be using it. When you're facing big guns, the armour can't take the hit straight up. But this old duck, she side scrapes like a champion with that decent side armour and that boat-shaped hull that the Soviets have. When you look at the side of a Soviet tank, that flat that you're seeing is actually storage, it's not the hull armour. The hull armour is sloped backwards behind that. When you're brawling in town, be careful where you put your inside front idler wheel, because a round through there takes the track off and penetrates your hull, you lose hit points and you're immobilised. Get yourself hull down, wiggle your turret while you reload, because those two hatches on top are weak spots and a lot of people have figured out that's where you shoot them. All in all, the IS-6 is showing her age. In the last 12 months or so, she's been left behind with the introduction of the more superior premium tanks. Is she worth the gold? Well, if the Defender's available for sale, no. But given that you can't always buy the Defender, she's still a solid purchase. Thank you for joining me again in the fridge, and please pass by those like and subscribe buttons on your way out.